What is up, guys? Happy Thursday. Welcome to the D&D Sports Show. And we have a lot to talk about, so we're going to get right down to the point. Starting this off with Tuesday Night Football. David, what did you think about it?
Well, I noticed a lot of things. I definitely did not anticipate the loss of Tre'Davious White to be quite as big of an impact on the field, but he's definitely a leader on that defense, as well as Matt Milano. I think that if these two teams played with completely healthy rosters, I think this game is completely different. The offense and special teams definitely didn't help that defense out at all with the muffed kick, as well as a few the drop on the opening drive that led to an interception. It definitely was not the prettiest game by any means, but I mean, Derrick Henry only had 57 yards rushing. Obviously, the two touchdowns hurt them in the end, but I mean, given them, they had the ball on Buffalo's side for most of those drives. It was just a sloppy game overall. I think that with a fully healthy lineup, with John Brown back, with Matt Milano back, Davis White back, I think that this is a lot closer of a game. I also think that the fact that the game kept getting moved around, I think hurt both teams. It didn't only hope. I think everybody just assumed that because they couldn't practice, it would hurt Tennessee. When in fact, it really hurt the other team because you have your week to week rituals and everything like that that you do to get ready for games. And I think that maybe come Sunday they kind of slacked off a little bit, or on that Monday where you're supposed to be watching film from Sunday. It could definitely affected the Bills' performance. Josh Allen definitely didn't look like himself. But I mean, he was missing his number 2 receiver. So that's never easy. So, he's trying to force the ball to Diggs a little bit more. But overall, I mean, a dominant performance by the Titans. They everybody was kind of not even giving them a chance in this game. Unfortunately, the game time decision to hold Tre'Davious White out definitely hurt him because AJ Brown kind of had his way with Josh Norman, and it's never anything that you want to see, especially as a fan. But I just got to tip my hat to the Titans because they dealt with adversity a little bit more than we did.
Um, yeah, I get what you're saying on that note. I mean, both quarterbacks looked very shaky and mediocre against these defenses. I mean, Tannehill went 21 for 28, which isn't bad, but only 195 yards with 3 touchdowns. So he was efficient, but he just couldn't. He wasn't throwing long passes or getting the ball downfield. These were short. These were 10 to 20-yard passes consistently, and he was just basically picking apart the Bills' defense and secondary. The reemergence of AJ Brown, which is good to see for not only himself coming off of the injury, but just for this team without Corey Davis playing and Adam Humphries. It's nice to see that their number one receiver just came back and took over the game for them. That's what they needed. Both their top 2 receivers were out in this game. So to get back their number one receiver overall, I think it's a good sign for Tennessee, and they might actually start playing well.
Yeah, and I mean, excluding the 3 punts that they had, the 3 drives that resulted in punts, I mean, they had quite a few short drives in there. They had a 12-yard drive. They had a 75-yard drive, 18-yard drive, as well as a 30-yard drive and a 16-yard drive. So that's why Tannehill's stats may not have necessarily lined up with a normal outing. I mean, when you only have to drive the ball that far, you don't have to force the ball down the field. So I understand the lack of stats in regards to Tannehill, but I do think that he definitely managed the game well. With them getting that early interception, that costly drop by Andre Roberts that popped into the hands of Malcolm Butler, I think that kind of really hurt them in the long run. And I think that had they not necessarily done that, maybe you got some points. Caught a little bit of a lead at the start of the game. I think this game ends differently. Um, I think it was kind of they were digging out of a hole from the very beginning, and I think that this Bills team, if that happens, it's a tougher road for them, especially when they're not 100% healthy.
But what did you think about TJ Yeldon's play this week? I mean, here's
Uh,
somebody who was supposed to be the number 3 running back on the depth chart, and here he is now almost leading the yards.
And yeah, they're gonna have to figure out something with Devin Singletary. And I know that he's hurting with the loss of Zach Moss because you kind of lose that interior rusher. Because when you can just put Zach Moss in there and run it up the middle, carry after carry, and then you can bounce it outside with Devin Singletary, which is kind of his specialty, and like catching passes out of the backfield. When you rely on him to be your every down back, he's not going to perform the way he should. But TJ Yeldon, he's been there for a while. I got the privilege to watch him for most of his career. I mean, excluding his Jacksonville years where he was kind of shaky up and down. But I mean, he's always been a consistent guy. I mean, a lot of people forget that. I mean, he was basically a running back for the longest time. I mean, he's always been there. He's been the consistent. He's always gives us good looks, especially whenever he's on, second and third teams. So, I mean, it doesn't surprise me, but it's just a name that I haven't heard in a while with, Devin Singletary and Zach Moss taking majority of the carries. So it's good to see him though. Good to see him though come out and even, I mean, 7 carries for 52 yards is definitely no slacker job by any means.
100%. And the last thing I want to mention is injury wise. Let's talk about the offensive injury for Buffalo and John Brown. So, looking at the stats real quick, Stephon Diggs had 16 targets. Gabriel Davis had the next closest at 9. How big of a gap is that when you have John Brown missing in the lineup?
Yeah, I mean that's what I was talking about. Like the 16 targets to Stephon Diggs, there was about 2 of them that he was literally triple covered on the play. But whenever your game plan for the first few weeks of the season is the same thing, where you go through your progressions, where you're looking for Stephon Diggs, then you're looking for John Brown, then you look for Gabe Davis. It definitely hurt Gabriel Davis. In his play as well, because with the John Brown and Stephon Diggs on both sides, Gabe Davis I mean, he's been having field days left and right with this team, and so I think it really hurt them. And like I said, I think if he was there, it'd be a different story, because I don't know if I mean, the number 2 cornerback was allowed to cover Gabe Davis, and Andre Roberts just is not a second. He's a special teamer at best. Maybe throw him in there for some like trick plays or whatever, like they've been doing with Isaiah McKenzie with like pitches and stuff. But I really don't think that Andre Roberts is a consistent number 3. As you can see, I mean, he dropped a crucial pass at the start of the game, and he also muffed the kick, or he fumbled the kick. He didn't muff it, but he fumbled the kick. So they're going to have to shore things up in just all aspects of the game. Especially with this next week, I mean, you get a short week in terms of normal time. So get ready for Monday against the Chiefs. Chiefs coming off a rough game as well, so it'll be interesting to see how they bounce back. This is going to be a gut check game for the Buffalo Bills.
This is actually going to be a really good game, I think, on Monday. So I'm anxious to see how this Monday night game turns out. But all right, moving on.
Oh, with that, we're gonna stick in the NFL for just a little bit longer. Some big news. The Falcons unfortunately had to shut down their facilities because they have a positive test. So this kind of throws their next few weeks in limbo on what's going on. But Marlon Davidson is the one that they put on the defensive tackle out of Auburn, the rookie. Yeah. If this does become an issue, it will affect, obviously, the game this Sunday. What are your thoughts on this? Like, how do you think the NFL should handle this? Because I mean, it's only 3 days away from game. Like, I don't know. I don't know exactly what your options here if you're the NFL.
It's just such a. I don't know how you do that. Coming into the season, we all knew that we were going to have to work through some of this adversity, dealing with positive tests and moving games and schedule changes. But sometimes these schedule changes are really affecting teams, and I think that at some point you just kind of got to postpone the game indefinitely or just end up not playing it. Because I mean, moving games around, we've seen 5 or 6 games get moved from week 11 up to week 6 to week 8, and it's tough on teams trying to figure out not only one game plan but have to switch it last minute for a completely different opponent. So I don't know. The NFL is going to have to take a huge look at this, but at this point, you're going to have to. I think you're going to postpone this Atlanta game this weekend if there's one more positive test.
And I think that a lot of that falls on a lot of that falls on the way that the NFL handled these first few weeks. I think, and a lot of people thought that the Titans should have had to forfeit their game against the Pittsburgh Steelers as well as against the Buffalo Bills because they should not punish a team that was already ready to play going into um, that week. They shouldn't have punished them, and I kind of agree to that to a certain extent. I mean, obviously, like that Steelers game was kind of like a fluke, like oh, it just popped up during game week. But if they couldn't make, if they didn't have like they should have had to have used their practice squad. If they were on the COVID, sorry, you don't get to play. Like I think that I don't think that you should reward people for not applying COVID prevention measures, especially like when they blatantly like did an investigation and found the Titans were not listening to that at all. And I think that
Right, right.
that kind of hurt that kind of hurt the Bills, and I mean it's going to hurt the Steelers as well because the Steelers were on a roll, and they kind of got screwed out of that you know
And
whole.
this is a whole accountability factor. I think that the NFL has to take into account. I mean, like you said, the Titans weren't abiding by the NFL protocols that they placed for this specific season. And I think, yeah, I do think at the end of the day, they should have had to forfeit at least one of those two games. It's not fair to make the other team suffer. I mean, the Bills are getting the butt end of this deal with COVID, with having to move three of their games over the course of the next 5 weeks. Like that's just it's not cool to any teams that have to deal with that are taking the correct measures to keep their players and staff safe.
Yeah, and I mean it just hurts with like travel plans and everything. Like you planning on going to somewhere, it just throws everything into limbo. And I know that everybody who there's a lot of fans who were confused at why they rescheduled the game for a Tuesday night. But it's already over and past with. But I'm just curious to see, they're gonna have to fix the way they handle this in the future, because right now it's not looking the best for
And it's gonna get worse as we roll closer into winter. So I think this is really going to have to be looked at and placed under extreme scrutiny soon.
Yeah. So with the COVID going around, obviously, it not only affected the professional levels but also the collegiate levels. Some big news out of Florida, with I believe there was 15 confirmed positive tests this past week. Kind of incredible to see, one of the top teams in the SEC, unfortunately have to postpone their game this weekend against LSU, which is kind of been a rebound game for them, in my opinion. But we had tests with them as well as Alabama, not necessarily a player per se, but I mean the AD and Nick Saban testing positive. It's going to be a tough road if the Alabama stays on course this weekend, especially going up against Auburn. I mean, without your coach, it's not going to be easy by any means.
Alabama's playing Georgia.
Oh, Georgia, that's what I meant, not Auburn. Georgia, sorry, Georgia. You're right. You're right. You're right.
um, Now that being said, I think this kind of actually helped Florida just a little bit. I say that because Kyle Trask wasn't supposed to play this week due to um, him being sick, not COVID wise, but just being under the weather. So I believe that this COVID may have actually helped Florida out as compared to looking at it through a negative connotation. However, a couple other games that got postponed due to COVID was Oklahoma State and Baylor, Cincinnati at Tulsa, and Mizzou at Vanderbilt, which two of these games have top 10 seeded teams. Cincinnati being ranked 8 and Oklahoma State being ranked 7, which this would have been a huge game for Oklahoma State and Baylor due to those implications in the Big 12 currently. Um, so with those being said, I think I still think Bama can get it done even without Nick Saban at the helm. I think Nick Saban has groomed not only his coordinators but his assistant coaches to basically be fill-ins for him as soon as he goes down.
Yeah, and I think it's gonna just be interesting just to watch it unfold. And obviously, there's still a lot. I mean, there's a lot of time before that really before we know the official word on what everything is. But kind of interesting that these tests have come out, but right as the Pac-12 are allowing families into their stands, as well as like other teams kind of adjusting their attendance numbers as well.
Yeah, I mean, there were. I think there some stadiums are at 22 to 25% capacity right now. Um, I remember watching the SMU game and watching their whole student section get thrown out because they weren't abiding by mandates, and I
Hmm.
think that you have to be extremely strict with these coming in college, especially dealing with a bunch of college kids, which are the main source of people at these games.
Yeah, and I think that also has to do like I think they're definitely taking the necessary steps to prevent it further. Especially like kind of the big news that came out. It came out this week is that the NCAA Division One, the FBS is not going to require a 500 record anymore to make a bowl game, because a lot of these teams with the postponement, cancellation of games, etc. Some of these teams, having to pick up teams they normally wouldn't face, tougher opponents and stuff. There's some good teams that would be left out of bowls because just of how their schedule worked out.
Right. Like any team from the lower end of the SEC. I mean, yeah, you're usually dealing with them, but
But you're playing more than just you're just playing
right.
just your conference. You're playing the whole SEC basically. So it's like you got to play those three extra ranked teams that kind of just that you normally wouldn't play. And I
Yeah.
mean, yeah, you're probably gonna lose if you're not. You might win one here or there, but
Let's take Mizzou for example. Somehow beats LSU, loses to everybody else so far in the SEC.
yeah. And I know that one team that's really hurting from that game was Mississippi State, because it looked like as if when they beat LSU, they were going to be a top dog, and then or was it Mississippi State?
They beat LSU.
Yeah, or is it A&M? Which one?
It was Mississippi State first game of the season.
Yes, and then they followed up with 0-2 because LSU is not as good as what we thought they were. And so obviously, that's like that their resume kind of is hurting with that. But we'll see how it goes. There's a lot of football to be played yet, so we don't even need to really talk about bowl games yet. Just wanted to mention the fact that the uh, FBS committee came out and said that. So it'll be interesting to watch. I'm really intrigued, and I'm ready for a fun weekend of football. Hopefully, they get the rest of the games in, but we'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah, there are some good matchups this weekend. We're gonna talk more about this tomorrow, but I there's about three games I really want to watch to see how this will shake up. The top five for next week. So I really hope we get to watch some college football this weekend.
Yeah. Also, something that's going on this week and maybe into this weekend, we'll have to see. We have some baseball, and quite the uh, quite the start to these two series. Not the start that honestly most people thought, with Tampa taking the first three before dropping last night's contest in kind of the Astros' last ditch effort to stay alive, and then Atlanta taking two out of the three with the Dodgers finally figuring out that offense in their record setting first inning with 11 runs.
All right, yeah, I want to let's start with the LCS first because I think this has been um, quite not really a shock at this point. If you've watched Tampa Bay baseball over the course of the past month, you will understand why this comes as no shock that they were up 3-0. Um, they have good pitching. Their bullpen's great. Arozarena is just on fire. He will definitely get the MVP if the Rays make it to the World Series and win the World Series. Randy Arozarena will be the MVP, hands down. But they kind of hit a little skid last night at Game 4. Granke on the mound looked actually like old Granky, 7 strikeouts, let up 1 home run through 6 innings pitched. But Tyler Glass now still he's he's pitching well, but he's not pitching to his normal level. I mean, he let up 4 runs on 8 hits in 6 innings, but it's I don't know. They just Houston needed something, and Jose Altuve gave it to him, and George Springer also helped out in putting runs on the board. But I don't think this. I think this is just a blip on the radar for Tampa. I think they go in tonight and just finish the series. I don't think Houston has a chance to come back. I think this is just one of those games. If you had to lose, you lost early, and you just move on.
Now, I think, and obviously I've been wrong about this Tampa team in the past. But I do think that going into this game tonight, I think the rookie Luis Garcia finds a way to slow down this offensive of the Rays, and I think that they find a way to force this to a game 6. And I think that the Rays will win this in 6.
That's fair. I mean, the Rays are still going to win, but
Yeah,
I think it'll
no,
be tonight.
I know. I think that the rookie's going to come out and he's going to be motivated, firing strikes. And I think that ultimately the Astros offense is going to get just enough done for them to get the victory tonight. And I think that it'll set up a crucial game 6, because if this thing goes 7 games, it's going to be a tough one for the Rays to fight back from. But flipping it over to the NL side, what a crazy first inning from the
LA.
Dodgers. I mean, yeah. I mean, talk about coming out firing. They definitely kind of took the momentum they had from that game 2 ninth inning where their comeback was just short. Comeback firing out 11 runs. That is the new MLB record for the postseason. And then just basically shutting down. I mean, there's a couple runs late that they're in the 9th inning that kind of made the score look a little bit closer than it was. But I mean, talk about a dominant performance after kind of everybody was kind of, oh man, they're down 2-0. What's going to happen?
And I think this Dodgers team is still poised to win this series. They struggled in game 1. Game 2, like you said, they fell just short of that comeback. But to put up 15 runs in the first 3 innings of a game 3, that's an MLB record that has never been done before. And I think that this kind of flipped a switch on this Dodgers team saying, all right, we can actually do this. We can go after Atlanta. We can get to their pitching. We can get their start out of the game early. Then I think if they get into the bullpen, then I think they're kind of more poised to add those runs into their rallies, because they've shown over the past 2 games that they can hit the bullpen when they get in there. So I think that is crucial for the Dodgers to make this a series and fight back.
Yeah, and I think I'm actually going to bring up a few bonus questions today, since we have kind of a shorter episode. But my father Carlos said that Clayton Kershaw is one of the best pitchers in the or one of the greatest pitchers in recent history, but he can never show up in the postseason. So with that being said, if he comes out tonight and lays an egg and just gives up hit after hit after hit and gets chased in the 2nd inning and they end up losing, ultimately to lose the next game, what does that do to his legacy?
I mean, he has the third highest ERA among pitchers to make 5 or more career starts in the LCS at a 5. So he's not when he gets into the LCS, he's not lights out Kershaw that we see during regular season.
I mean, I've seen him multiple times, with him going up against the Cubs. So, I mean, I know in the playoffs, he's not as dominant as what he is in the regular season. And that's just something that he's going to have to live with. And if he can right the ship and he can lead the Dodgers at his age right now and find a way to give him a quality start tonight, and then, and if he comes back to pitch Game 7, which I'm assuming he will, if they find a way to win this series and make it to the World Series, and he has a good showing in the World Series, I mean, I think he can save his, a little bit of his postseason credibility.
If he doesn't win a World Series, I still think he will end up in the Hall of Fame because he is a dominant regular season pitcher. We've seen it for years. 2 Cy Youngs under his belt. I just think he's too good not to have in the Hall of Fame. But you don't want him. I wouldn't want him personally on my team starting in a crucial game in the playoffs due to his lack of production over recent years. But that's also not just his fault.
Yeah, and as a sports fan, I really would love to see. I know that like in his starts against the Cubs, I know there was literally like I think in one of the games there was like 3 errors, and that just like killed him. And when he gets runners on, he's not the best with runners on. I know, and so if you get to him early and often, you'll find a way. I think that this game is a very crucial one though towards his postseason legacy. I think if he lays a stinker out there, I think it's obviously this game can only help him. Obviously, everybody already has this mindset that he can't perform in big games. But I think that if he comes out and shows that he can do it, I mean, there should be no reason why you can't take a little bit of slack off of him. If he can make a World Series run this year, which I think that team is definitely talented enough to do, but they just got to get this. They got to right the ship, and they gotta make this 2-2 tonight. I think because if the Braves get any momentum going into this next game, I think it's going to be. It's definitely not going to be easy for them to overcome, especially with. Well, I don't think they've announced their pitcher yet, but one can assume that it'll be. It should be Freed, right?
Going into Game 5, yes.
Yes, yeah. So it should be Max. I mean, their man on the mound. I think it's going to be tough. So, anything else you want to mention about baseball?
Just that honestly, like you said, tonight's a huge game.
For both series.
I was gonna say for both series, I think if Atlanta takes this game tonight, this series is over, and I think Tampa wins tonight to clinch the World Series berth.
So I want to mention one more thing. Uh, kind of some big news from teams not affiliated with the playoffs, but I don't know if you saw this, but the Chicago White Sox have gotten the okay to talk to Tony La Russa about the opening at manager. Obviously, he's at the age of 76, so he hasn't been a manager in just about 9 years. So
my take on this is, I don't think he'll come back.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, you got to start with them in 79, so it'd be a fitting way to be it. But they do have permission to talk to him. Just a topic of local interest with La Russa spending 16 years here at STL. So,
but did you hear who the likely replacement is for the White Sox? Who is on the short list? AJ Hinch. So that's going to be because his suspension ends at the end of the World Series. So I think
you're absolutely right. I mean, it would be very, very interesting to see just how that works out. But
I just think Tony La Russa he's invested too much in his executive roles with the MLB to go back to managing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's one of those things where it's like, I think he knows when his time's up. I think he knows he's better fit as a manager, or not a manager, but an executive. So we'll just see how it goes. I mean, obviously, maybe he gets a change of heart because everybody does. Some people will come back, and you don't expect them to come back. I mean, nobody expected John Gruden to come back and coach at Oakland. So I mean, it's always possible. So we'll just have to see.
Yes, we will. But I do think no matter what, even if he comes back and has a dud of a managing career with the White Sox, he's still a Hall of Fame manager.
Oh, absolutely. No, there's no way that he's not going to be. In my opinion, I mean, he's been dominant for a long time, always competitive, always found a way to get it done, and then as well as I mean, you just add um the role that he's had as an executive. I mean, obviously he's been doing an okay job there as well. Um, but that being said, we're gonna wrap things up with question time, and we're gonna kind of go transition back to the NFL for a little bit because we're gonna answer two questions today because they're kind of shorter. So, the first one was asked by multiple people. We uh, we had asked by Carlos, my dad, and as well as Clay. They want to know if Le'Veon Bell would be a good fit for the Bears, and if not the Bears, where is he going to end up?
Is he a good fit for the Bears? Not necessarily. Um, I think you stick with Tariq Cohen and David Montgomery. I think they are. It was working. It is working for them right now. They don't have a lot of offense as it is, but I think that chemistry is already there. You don't want to You don't want to bring someone in to kind of throw, especially someone like Le'Veon Bell, who has had a lot of issues on and off the field with the teams he's been with.
Well, I think the reason why they mentioned that is because while they do have those two, they picked up Lamar Miller, and a lot of the people don't think Lamar Miller is the fit to be Tariq Cohen's replacement. So it's going to be interesting to see because I do think that Le'Veon Bell is literally what they need, and he blocks better than David Montgomery, and he catches passes better than David Montgomery. And Nick Foles, as you know, likes to throw to backs out of the backfield. And so I think that with him being there, I think he's a better option. If he can get him, he's a way better option than Lamar Miller. No offense to Lamar Miller, but he just hasn't necessarily proved himself since he got hurt in Houston. He really hasn't shown that he's the Lamar Miller of old. So I do think that he would be a good fit. It's going to be interesting to see if they take a stab at him, offer him. I mean, I don't know if you would want to go play in Chicago. I know there's a couple of other places that I feel like he would be a good fit for. I mean, you can go to other contenders like the Chiefs, because the production behind Allaire, when he doesn't perform, they don't really have anybody behind him. They're stacking veteran running backs in Tampa. You have some teams that, maybe not competing that I don't know if you'd really want to go to, like Miami, that, they might not be competing. And I think that that's probably part of the reason why Le'Veon Bell, wants to compete. There's rumors that he wants to go back to Pittsburgh, but I don't think he
He
will go
won't go
back to
back.
Pittsburgh.
That the way that ended in
The way it
Pittsburgh
ended, no, I know.
bad.
That's what I'm saying. But like the production behind James Conner has been kind of shaky. But I just think that really this is anybody's team. I mean, anybody could use like this is a third down back,
I have a dark
a
horse team
pass
for you now.
catching. Okay.
Buffalo.
And yeah, no, absolutely. Buffalo could have him. I mean, obviously TJ Yeldon stepped up, but I think with what they need, just adding him to the passing game in Buffalo, plus he wouldn't have to go very far. I mean, he goes
Goes right over the river.
right over the river, exactly. And it's one of those things where it's like I would love to see it happen. um, we'll see. Obviously, he can go really honestly wherever he wants. I think most teams would take him.
I just
Some
think
people said
he's
some people said that the Browns would be a good fit while Nick Chubb is hurt, but I don't think he wants to go to a place where he'll get phased out eventually. I think he wants to go where he'll consistently be impacting on the field. Because I think that's part of the reason why he went to the Jets, because he knew that he was going to kind of be the guy. So I think if he can go to a place where he's the guy or the number two guy, I think he'll be happy, and I don't think he'll be as big of a problem in the locker room.
I agree with I just think to take on Le'Veon Bell is a lot to take on. Even back in Pittsburgh, he was outspoken. It got him into trouble. The whole ending in Pittsburgh, I don't think anybody can forget how that went. And then going to New York, he was supposed to be the lead back. His production really wasn't there. He sat out a full year, and now he's back and he's not playing well either. I mean, is it worth all of this for Le'Veon Bell? Is he the old Le'Veon Bell?
I
because
mean, I
that's
think,
really what it's dependent on.
and I think he can be the old Le'Veon Bell. I think it's just going to be if you're willing to put the time in. And I mean, if you've seen, like you mentioned about the dark horse with going to Buffalo, what Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott did with Stephon Diggs, where they took the personality that he was and they kind of made him into a team player. I mean, he knows that he's good. He's the guy. He's the number one guy. And he's not complaining about how many times he gets targeted because Josh Allen will throw him the ball. I mean, he's always going to get targets. I mean, if you think about it, I mean, he's a routine player though, because he's out there blocking and like doing things that he didn't do in Minnesota. And I think that it just shows that if you get the right, GM and coach, that they can fix any players being a locker room. I mean, Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott were willing to take on Antonio Brown. They literally had a trade lined up to get him a few years ago, and he didn't want to come to Buffalo. And so, like, I mean, they were willing to take on that personality. I mean, what you said may be right. I mean, maybe we do take on another personality, and I mean, it's not going to hurt. I mean, having another running back, especially with Zach Moss being kind of banged up and Devin Singletary having ankle issues, and maybe it is somewhere that he ends up. But I do still think that, the Bears and the Chiefs are the two contenders that I would say have the best chance to get him. And I think that they could use him to his full advantage. I mean, just think about Le'Veon Bell having to catch passes from Patrick Mahomes. Like, it's not even fair. And just going out there and blocking, that's all he has to do. I mean, if that's all he has to do, I mean, he's going to be productive. He doesn't have to run between the tackles every play and try to find holes in a shoddy offensive line in New York. I mean,
You're not wrong.
But with that being said, I wanted to bring up one more question, and this is kind of it kind of goes off of that, and I think it's a good transition because talking about Le'Veon Bell not being in New York anymore. So Bill O'Brien and Dan Quinn both got canned this season. Who is going to be the next one, and who are some kind of maybe not necessarily the next one, but who are coaches who you don't think are going to make it out of this year with their jobs?
Well, the next person to be fired should be pretty obvious for everybody in the NFL world. That would be Adam Gase, for those who actually don't know who we're talking about.
The man who shouldn't have a job anyway. I don't know
Correct.
he didn't do anything with Miami and he just got picked up by New York. I don't know. It's confusing, but yeah, no, he's definitely when he just let, Sam Darnold, he's not building around Sam Darnold. I think Sam Darnold's the interest for the Jets is just to start over. I think you trade Sam Darnold before the trade deadline, try to get some picks for him. Maybe he could go to a team like Indy, who has Phillip Rivers and Jacoby Brissett, who are both going to be free agents. Maybe Sam Darnold could be an option there behind that offensive line, and with that defense, giving him a chance to win. You just got to start getting rid of some of these guys who, you can get stuff for. I mean, they already started. They got rid of Jamal Adams, arguably one of the better safeties in the league, and then they just let Le'Veon Bell walk. I mean, this guy should not have a job. Like, as soon as you let him walk, he should have been fired on the spot.
Well, that's kind of like the Bill O'Brien trade. I mean, that idiotic of a move should have repercussions for it.
And I don't think anybody knew those repercussions until this year. How big of a loss that DeAndre Hopkins would be. How look at how the
production.
The production. Yeah, well, you have Brandon Cooks, who finally had kind of his standout game. Like, he finally kind of got things out. But if you look at it, who would have thought, Arizona 3-2 with DeAndre Hopkins? Then you have the Texans, who are sitting there at a nice old 1-4 without DeAndre Hopkins. Like, how would that have changed, in these close games, having a reliable receiver in DeAndre Hopkins and not relying on Brandon Cooks, who obviously has never really lived up to his, I guess his like peak years whenever he was with the Rams and then with the Patriots and everything. So
yeah, so Adam Gase is next out. Two coaches I want to take a look at real quick. Not necessarily will be the next one's fired, but depending on how the season starts trending will determine whether or not their seat gets uncomfortably hot, and that is Doug Peterson of the Philadelphia Eagles and Zach Taylor. But as a disclaimer, I think Zach Taylor has more leeway this year than Doug Peterson does because this kind of looks like a rebuilding Cincinnati team again. But they should be playing a lot better than they actually are.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that falls on the fact that they have a rookie quarterback. They were in most of the games. I mean, if you look at it, they lost by 3 points week 1. They lost by 5 points to a really good, well, it's looking like a really good Browns team. We'll see if that trend continues this weekend against the Steelers. And then, I mean, the Ravens defense is a really good defense, and it was a really bad game by Joe Burrow. So obviously it's never something. But I mean, they're also a field goal away from beating the Eagles as well. So I mean, it's frustrating, and I think that they need to take advantage of AJ Green's maybe his production right now. But like his name, because he still has a name in the league. And I think if you want to rebuild, you need to go full rebuild this year, and you need to try to get as much draft capital or as much young talent for somebody. Maybe I know that AJ Green wants to stay. He's came out multiple times to say he wants to stay with Cincinnati, wants to finish his career in Cincinnati. But I think that if you want to win, I think you're going to have to start building young pieces. I mean, you have Joe Mixon and Joe Burrow. If you can build a young offensive unit around that, start building stuff on the defensive side, I think that this team could compete. I mean, obviously they're in a really tough division, but I think they could be competing for a wild card spot as soon as maybe 2 years.
Yeah, and that's why I kind of was leaning towards him probably not getting canned right away
So he
because
would be like your third option behind Adam Gase and Doug Peterson right now, if you looked at the bigger picture of things.
if I looked at the bigger picture of things, I think Detroit's trending the wrong way, and possibly Matt Patricia would be
I
higher
was,
up on that list.
yeah, I agree. That was the name that I was gonna mention. We'll stick with Doug Peterson for the second, then we'll get to Matt Patricia. But Doug Peterson is obviously, I think he's kind of has a bigger spotlight on him because obviously he is a Super Bowl winning coach, and then kind of just lost all of that, put all of his faith in Carson Wentz, and it kind of came back to bite him in the butt because Carson Wentz has not looked like MVP Carson Wentz since his injury. And I know a lot of that falls on the fact that his receiving core is completely diminished. His leading receiver he had 2 catches going into this last game before he had his breakout performance. I mean, it's never easy. I mean, it's never easy for a coach to have to deal with everyone on his team being injured. But I think a lot of this falls on him and his game plan because I mean, I think he put too much faith in Miles Sanders. I don't think Miles Sanders is a lead back. I don't think that Carson Wentz is as good as what he thinks he is. I think they had a really talented team the year that they won the Super Bowl, and a lot of that fell in the defense because that defense was stout. And I think that he needs to figure out the identity of this team now. And I mean, if they can salvage the season and win, I mean, this is a very winnable division. Obviously, we've talked about that on Sunday, and we talked about it on Monday. But I mean, if he can come back and win the division, I think talks will kind of. But he's got to get on the winning track here. He's just got to start winning games. I mean, it starts this weekend. If he can show that he can beat Baltimore, I mean, especially with them coming to Philly, I think if they can win this game, I think a lot of pressure will be taken off that him, and he won't quite be on the hot seat, but he'll be on the verge of the hot seat this whole season.
And I think his seat is starting to get warm because I think in that Cincinnati game he should have attempted the 64-yard field goal.
Or went for it. Like what are you gonna
Yeah.
do? There's 9 seconds on the clock. We're gonna give him the ball with 58 yards to go, and
I mean,
it's like
he's not thinking. He's not coaching currently. He's just kind of there.
yeah.
So I think his job is in jeopardy after if he doesn't win this next week or two. I think he's done, 100%. But you wanted to talk about Mr. Patricia.
Oh yeah, so Matt Patricia is one of those guys who I never really thought would have a job coming into the season. Was just the with his just overall um presence and stuff like that. But I mean, coming into the season, you got to think about it. If if DeAndre Swift catches that ball, they're 2-2. If they don't have the second half collapse defensively, they'd be 3-1. I mean, they're right there. I mean, yeah, they're in a tough division with two pretty decent teams this year. It looks like in Chicago and Green Bay, and I think that always hurts them being in Green Bay's division, having to, that's basically 2 losses every year. But I think the rest of their schedule, they have a chance to, bounce back, maybe make a wild card. I mean, you got the Vikings twice. You have to beat them. You got the Panthers, very winnable game. Texans, we don't know who the Texans are still. Obviously, they bounced back without Bill O'Brien, but we don't know what team they are week in and week out. This Bears team is beatable. I mean, if you can put points on their defense, their offense is not going to outscore you. Obviously, you're going to have a tough game against the Colts, but you have Jaguars, Falcons back to back. You have to go 2-0 here if you want a chance to save your season. And if they don't go 2-0 here, I think that's when Patricia's job. If they lay an egg against the Jaguars, Patricia's not going to make it too much longer.
We have seen this Jaguars team play extremely well. So if it depends on what Jaguars team they face. If they face the week 1, week 2 Jaguars teams where the wins, then I think maybe he's not as much his fault. But if he just starts getting pummeled, then I think that's it. He's got to play well these next 2 games.
Yeah, so we're gonna pick up one more question because this question came in today and I kind of forgot about it, but Sean Waters wants to know what do you think about Chase Claypool's 4 touchdowns and how do you think that will impact his fantasy value down the road?
I think he's a solid number 2, number 3. I don't know. He overshadowed Juju this week, but I don't think that's going to happen often.
No,
I think
I think he's just definitely a like if you have him and pick him up, I do think that if you need to plug in a wide receiver, or if you need a flex position, I think he will be able to get you 4 or 5 catches for like 50 yards a week. But I would not anticipate the 38 points fantasy points that he put in week out.
honestly, I don't. There's only one rookie right now that I think will continue to put up numbers, and that's Justin Jefferson, due to that team having no real receivers besides Thielen and Jefferson at this point. As to where in Pittsburgh you have at least 2 to 3 before Chase Claypool. So I think he's a deeper league wide receiver at this point. Give it a couple weeks and see how it plays out. If he starts trending upward consistently, then he's going to move up into low high tier 2, low tier 1 potential wide receiver abilities.
Yeah, and I think also, you mentioned the one that will keep production up. I do think that there's a good chance that, Henry Ruggs and Jerry Jeudy will find their way eventually. But I think that also depends on their quarterback play. It depends on what Derek Carr comes out and plays, and then who the quarterback of the Broncos is going to be. So it'll be interesting to watch these rookies and first years come out. And I think that Chase Claypool is, like I said, if you need an emergency like plug in right now, like flex option, I think that he'll work out. I don't think he'll ever replicate this performance, but I mean, a touchdown and like 70 yards is not necessarily out of the question.
Right. I mean, 4 touchdowns in a game, that probably won't ever happen again for him yet. But he could still be potentially a new red zone threat for Big Ben. So
Definitely
maybe
something to watch out for.
right, because he could potentially have 4 catches, 62 yards, and 2 touchdowns because they use him as a red zone threat.
And the yards may not. Then the yards, obviously, like even in this 4 touchdown performance, he didn't have like a 78 or like a long, like super long touchdown. It was like it was shorter, like 20. Like he might only have like 40 yards and 2 touchdowns, but
I thought he had a 70-yarder.
did he? He might
I
have. I don't
thought
know.
he did.
I don't know. He might have, and I might just be lying about it. But anyway, but moral of the story is I think he beat a guy, but I think they're going to look to him more in the red zone. Obviously, I wouldn't necessarily anticipate week in and week out him burning. Let's see. No, he had a 35,
35.
a 35, a 32, a 2-yard
game,
run, and
one
then
of the
a
games
5-yard.
before he had an 84-yarder. Okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, definitely is somebody to look into. I don't know. Obviously, I don't think he will keep it up, but it'll be interesting to see his progression. Obviously, with him being a rookie, we'll see how he does. I know that a lot of people didn't really expect a whole lot out of him this year with him coming in the second round, but he's shown up. I mean, on the depth chart, I mean, you look at it, if Deontay Johnson has had some injury concerns. So, I mean, as long as he's out or as long as he's not performing to his standards, I would definitely look for him to be wide receiver 2 in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, because I mean, Juju's just getting triple teamed every game. I mean, he's had the most in a game so far is 8 targets, and that was against Denver in week 2. So I mean, he these two second, third, and fourth receivers have a chance to step up, but I still think Juju figures out how to get past this double and triple coverage.
Yeah, and that's just like we were talking about our fantasy talk on Sunday, like with like say a Zach Ertz or like another number one receiver. I forgot who the other one we were talking about was, but anyway, obviously their fantasy numbers are going to be down because they're the option. They are the man, they're the number one guy, and so they're going to get all the coverage, and so it's their job to show up as a number one and get open. You have to get open for, like the Allen Robinsons, the Keenan Allens, like those guys are number ones. The other teams know they're their number ones, but they still have, 5-6 catches a game, 10 targets, whatever, a couple touchdowns. So it's all on the number one to show up and be a number one. And I think that Juju has the talent to do that. And especially with, Claypool now, I mean, he at least has to be on somebody's radar. So if you have him, Johnson, and then Juju, I think they'll be set for weeks to come.
I agree. But all right, I think that wraps this up.
Yep, that's pretty much all we have to talk about today. We'll have our college football preview coming out tomorrow, as well as talking about the baseball games tonight. So it'll be interesting to see how tonight's games go. And with that being said, I think we're going to wrap it up, and we'll catch you next time. Peace.
Peace.